Okay, so for 165, there should be. Oh, I guess I didn't post it. So far it's just to create a very basic HTML file. Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't assign the second project yet. Um, but anyways, we'll get to it. I just want to start out with uh CZ210 because we were doing this thing yesterday, trying to recreate the EA website, but this is as far as we got, so still needs a lot of work. So let me start with this and switch back and forth, I guess. Let's go back to the EA website because this is what we're trying to create. So far we got the little icons and the three dots and the first item in the menu, games, with the two lists inside there. So we need to add the rest of these. I'll start with this one, I guess. But let me open up VS Code. And I believe I uploaded this to Google Classroom. It's under EA. Wait, no, that's just the icon. It's under. Where did I put it? Oh, the other class. This one. EA site clone. So you just download that lesson2.zip if you want to follow along. So this is what we have so far. So as far as the HTML, we've got a header so far, just a header, and inside the header we've got a top menu, a bottom menu, and the bottom menu has the three dots that's we're gonna be clicking on to open up another type of menu. And then we have the electronic arts, and then there's the nav. Oops. The nav is also in the bottom menu. It's got an unordered list, and the first list item is all we have so far. But that one list item um, that says games has two unordered lists inside. Okay, so that's just the first list item. So the second list item should be the second button here. So more experiences. Just copy paste that. So this will be the I guess we'll put in a H3 like the other one. More experiences, but inside this list item is also going to be another unordered list. This time it's not two unordered lists, it's just one. Unlike the other one where there's two. This one there's just going to be one because it's just one list here. So I'll just copy these and create an li. Oops. Li. That will be the first one. Li. That will be the second one. This is the third button in there, and another for this one. So let's see what that looks like. Alright, so now we have games, and then we have more experiences, and so like the other one, I want to get rid of the bullets and stuff. The other one has its own unique class on it, which is call to. So we should create a UL LI rule, just not with the column 2 on it, but just a regular LI, because most of them are just going to be regular LI. It's just this one has call 2 on it because there's 2 of these. But this one is just going to be 1, so why don't we put all the rules that we want for all LIs under this, and then just the stuff that's unique to the column 2 we'll put in here. So for this one, we want the H3s and the ULs to have these rules. So we want the H3 to span all columns if there is any. We want the UL, the style type, to be none. It's just for the LI call to, that's the only one that's going to have display grid tablet columns, 1FR, 1FR. Actually, this probably belongs here too because there's no columns in the other LIs. This one is just a single column, so the H3 doesn't need to span anything. So I'll put the grid call 1 to -1, which spans both columns or all columns. I'll put that here under call 2. And let me open this with live server instead of double clicking to open it. So open it with live server. And let's see, this list should be list style type none. Why isn't it? Have ULLI. Oh, why is it still showing? Nav ULLI UL. We want to be list style type none. So let me inspect. Oh, why is it so hard to grab this? There we go. Oh, nothing there. Oh, there. Okay. It looks like it didn't apply to this UL. Maybe we're not targeting it correctly. Nav UL LI UL. Nav UL LI UL. So it should have taken away the bullets. Did I not save? Let me try background color. Okay, so oh, I completely forgot. We're using SAS, and we closed the file. We opened it again, so we have to click watch SAS again, so it starts compiling. Because if you look here at the styles.css, this is what's being compiled. So this is being auto-generated whenever we save this one, but not until we click watch Sass. So once I click watch Sass, then this will update and our styles will start working. Cool, so we got rid of the bullets in the unordered list. Let's also get rid of this bullet. I guess we could, instead of saying list style type none on this unordered list, we could put this for right here, for the outer unordered list, and that way every other unordered list inside here will inherit list style type none, so now none of the lists will have bullets on them. So let me just keep adding the rest of these. So next is about. Going back to the HTML, the next list item, I'll just copy paste this one here. This one's going to say about. And let's see what's in about. Company, EA Studios, company, EA Studios, and our technology, and EA partners. Let's add a couple more. News and inside EA. So this one's news, inside EA. I'll copy this again for the next one, which is commitments. Commitments. Inside here we have positive play, inclusion, diversity, community investment, people and culture, and environment. Environment. And then lastly, we have resources. So copy this again. And this is gonna say resources. This will say help. Forums. Careers. Parental controls. Accessibility. And press. Okay, so that's it for our navigation menu. So we got games, more experiences, about, commitments, resources. Okay, so now let's start styling this a little bit to make it look more like this. So first of all, the top menu is gonna be all black. And we have a top menu, let's see, with the three things inside. I did give the top menu a width, I think, last time. I might have to change the width to 100%. Or we can make the header black. And since this is inside the header, it'll be black up there, and then we'll just make the bottom part white. since I gave this a width of 300 pixels, just so I could, spread these apart. I'll leave that as width 300 pixels, and I won't put the background color. Well, I did put a background color, but I'm gonna get rid of that background color. Let's make it nothing, so just get rid of that one. And just make the whole header black. So background color #000 for black. And since the whole thing right now is the header, the whole thing just turns black. So let's also make the color white so we can see stuff in there. Color #FFF. And let's change the bottom half to white. So the bottom one is this one, div bottom menu. Let's put background color #FFF. And then let's change the color of this back to black so we can see the buttons. Okay. And then of course we need to, make this look the way it is, which is just a row of the buttons. So this is the H3s that we created. So these H3s need to be listed horizontally. And then we also need to collapse them so you can't see the stuff inside. At the moment, this part's going to be hard to figure out because we can probably, since all of this is inside one list item, we could give the list item like a specific height, like let's say 20 pixels, and then say overflow hidden, so only the first thing inside will be showing. Or how else can we do it? Because we have this whole list item, or we can just hide the ULs. Like if there's any UL inside the LI, we can just say make the height 0 and overflow hidden. So this won't show, but this will. Could do it that way too. I think that would make more sense, maybe. And then we're gonna want a way to click and open and close that. So we could maybe target the H3 and use a sibling selector and say if I click on this, then if there's any unordered list sibling to the H3, let's change the height of that to whatever it needs to be to show again. Because we're going to make these have a height of 0 right now, so let's do that. So we're looking at div bottom menu, nav ul. Actually, nav ul, liul, the inside unordered list. Because the outside one is the entire navigation itself. We want the list item ul, so the one that's here. So again, that's going to be ul, li, ul. We're going to say height 0 and overflow hidden, and that should hide them. They're gone. So now it's just the H3s. So what we need to do next is line up these list items. Because right now the only thing you see inside the list item is the H3. The UL is hidden. Yeah, so the H3, I don't know if we have any rules for it yet. Not at the moment, so but that's where we would go. So let's make the LIs, let's make the UL display flex so these can go next to each other. So ul display flex, and I'm not sure what the spreading apart is about. I think it's because of the unordered list inside still has a width, even though I put height 0, there's still a width on them, so maybe you could put a width of 0 as well on these. Okay, so now we can see these. Let's look at this for a second. I think display flex is the right move for this. I also want electronic arts to be next to it. Where is that? That's this H2 outside of the nav. That's then we'll worry about that after we take care of the unordered list here inside the nav. So this is fine, but I don't know if it's going to be a problem later, having a width of 0 on the unordered lists. It might look weird animating it. Actually, no, it'll be fine. So now we just need to give this a bigger width. Let's see, it's gonna have to take up a decent amount of space, like I would say like 60% of the bottom menu, and then the other 40% is this and some empty space. So we should give the unordered list, or the nav, I guess, since really that's, I mean, the nav is just an unordered list inside, so, but let's just do it on the nav. We'll say width of like 60%, or we shouldn't do that. We should just use display grid on the entire header. Would that make sense? We got the header with the bottom. Actually, sorry, not the whole header. Just the bottom menu, because all of this stuff is in the bottom menu. So let's make the bottom menu display grid, and then split it into maybe 2 columns. First column will be electronic arts, and this thing, well, they're 2 separate things, so maybe 3 columns. So the first one will be the 3 dots, and then electronic arts, and then the third column will be the nav. It's just gonna be annoying because we got to then worry about when we collapse this. It's no longer 3 columns now, it's just 2 columns. But we'll worry about the mobile size after we take care of this one. So let's make it 3 columns. 1, 2, 3. And it'll be like 1 FR, 3 FR, and then like 7 FR, if we're talking about like the ratio of how much space they take up. I think we could do that. I think we could also use display flex, to be honest. We could put display flex on the bottom menu as well. That might make more sense actually. Let me try that first. So there's the bottom menu. Let's add display flex, so we don't have to worry about the number of columns that way. So yeah, so now they're all next to each other, electronic arts and this and the 3 buttons. Let's just change it so it's in the front instead of on the right side. So for that, it's just justify contents flex start. Wait, that didn't do anything. display flex, justify content. Justify items. Should be justify content. I don't know. Hmm. What's this first block here? There's nothing there, right? There shouldn't be anything in there. It's just part of the header. Yeah, so... Oh, wait. Why is there two columns? Okay, I forgot I have display grid on the header. Yeah, I have display grid on that. But I didn't really specify how many columns I wanted. I just put justify content flex and, but uh, let's just specify the number of columns. Put grid template columns should be just a single column. 1FR. Okay, now it works. 1FR, but what happened to the EA logo? It's there, I think. I think when we saved the EA logo, we made it black, so we can't see it right now. But what other problems do we have? Well, this problem where they don't really fit, like, starts looking messy when you collapse this. That will be taken care of whenever we switch from this view to, it's gonna have to collapse into this hamburger button. So not worry about that at the moment. I want to bring back the EA logo there. I think it's here. It's just black, so you can't see it on the black background. Where is our SVG? Just need to change the color of this SVG to white. It doesn't have any color specified, so by default it's just going to be black. Let me just open that with Illustrator and change the color. Yeah, we don't want this just black. Just I'll make it a light gray color, so in case we end up putting it on a white background, we'll still be able to see it. So let's change this color to something like this. And close and save it. And yeah, that should update. Now we can see it. There it is. Why did it come to the front though? I want it to be on the right side. This was making it go to the right side before, but since I made it a single column, it doesn't do that anymore. So what could we do? Let me give the top menu a background color so I could see exactly where it is. So it's there. How do we get it to line up on the right side? I've put float right on it, which was working before, but since that's not working, I'm gonna get rid of it. Float right wasn't really doing anything, right? So maybe, let's see, create tab column 1FR. Maybe make sure it's got a width of 100%. It stretches across the whole top, but then now it's bigger than we want it to be. Let's leave it at 300 and see how else we can push it to the right side. I could use position absolute, but I don't want to use that yet. Let me see if there's another way. Like, this doesn't work, so let's get rid of it. Let's try text align, right? That does nothing, so let me also make sure, yep, SAS is compiling. Let's try this again, does nothing, so get rid of it. Um, hmm. How about, I guess we have no choice. Position absolute and right 0. And that puts it to the right, but when you make something position absolute, it's like the other elements ignore it, so that's the problem with that's why I didn't want to use absolute. What about relative? And then just put like left, I don't know, 100. If we do 100%, it's going to get pushed out completely, so we're not going to even see it, so it's going to be hard to figure out. Like if I bring it to like 80%, that might work at some sizes, but not all. Like it's there, but it's too far gone when you make this smaller. So left and relative is definitely not gonna be a good idea. You would think it's easy, right? Just make it go to the right side. Let's look up CSS grid, align right, see if there's a way to do it. Oh, do we have to use align items instead of justify content? I doubt it, but let me try that just in case. Align items. No. Oops, we're putting it on the wrong place. It doesn't even have align items, right? It just has self, line items, center, flex end, flex start. This is for vertical alignment, so it's definitely not that. Normally we use justify content. Maybe I have to put right. Nope. Flex end. Nope. How many columns do we have in here? Inspect. So it is just a single column, just one and two rows, single column. So it's not like this is in the wrong column or anything. We just have one column and we just need this to go to the right side of that column. I'll try align self on the top menu. align self, flex end, align self right. Nope, that definitely, I did something, but kind of did the opposite of what you would expect. What if we said left then? Oops. Align self, flex end, does nothing, so I don't know why it keeps bringing up align self. CSS grid, align to the right. Were we supposed to just put end because it's not a flex box? Nope, that doesn't do it either. Very, very annoying. I don't know why it's not working. It should just be justify content flex end or right, but none of those are working, so curious. I don't want to give up, but I don't want to waste too much time trying to figure this one out either. There's like no help online either. CSS grid, justify content. Right. Okay, I'll have to figure that out later. Or we could just do a workaround, which would be to what we could do is, since it doesn't want to align to the right side like that, maybe we could, where is it? It's this whole top menu. Maybe we could put these inside another container. So take all these, stick them inside a div, and then make that div have a width of 100% with the black background. That's gonna be the same issue, I think. Top menu. Oh wait, what is this? I spelled flex and wrong. I don't know if that was the issue, but no, makes no difference. Okay, so we put this in a div. Let's make that div. So make that div, which is here, inside the top menu. So top menu div, give that, put the display flex and the width of 300 and all that on here. and make the top menu itself width of 100%, and display flex, and justify content right or flex end, whichever. I mean, right works, but flex end also works. And then get rid of that background color. I don't know why I had to do that though, and it didn't work without creating an extra div. Should have worked just the same. I don't know what the problem was with that. I think it's just when you have grid columns, it's just impossible to, without making the width of that content 100%, to push things to the right side. Like the grid column just collapses or something. I don't know. But do it this way. Just for the top menu, create another div that's going to be the container for the three things in here. And make that div have a width of 300 pixels, but make top menu have a width of 100%. Give it a display flex property and justify content to the right or flex end, so it pushes this to the right of itself. But that I think works. So let's also give it a little bit of padding because we don't want these to be touching the top and bottom. So I guess you could put it on top menu, or you could put it on this div. Padding 5 pixels, maybe 10. I am making things bigger than the other one, but 10 pixels looks like the amount of padding we need. And then this is lined up how it's supposed to be. Okay, the top part looks good now. So I guess we can just focus on the bottom one now. The top menu is done, I would say. Now let's look at the bottom menu. So it's got the 3 buttons: electronic arts, games, more experiences, blah blah blah, and then we need to, I guess, spread those apart a little bit because they're too close together. So bottom menu needs to have, it has display flex, justify content, flex start. We could also say, I mean, we could leave it like that and just put some margin next to each of these. Trying to see, should we give this like a fixed width and then spread them apart like that? So give bottom menu a fixed width. Bottom menu is inside header. I think we could do that. So I'm gonna put a width on bottom menu. Let's say, let's figure out what it needs to be. Give it a width of 80%. Actually, not a percentage. We need a fixed width on this. So let's do like, let's start with 900 pixels, see what that looks like. That's 900 pixels. So about that far. It's gonna collapse at, I guess, collapses around like 1,000 pixels probably. So even before reaching, like, this is the width, so this white part, that's the width of 900 pixels. As long as it fits there, and if we spread it apart, it'll fill up this area more nicely. So in order to fill it up, we'll do, instead of justify content, flex start. We'll do justify content space between, or evenly. Spreads them apart. Space between. Space around. Let's just stick to space evenly. And I want this to come a little bit more this way though. So that's why I don't want to use space evenly. Let's just use space between. So this goes all the way to the left side. That's all the way on the right. But yeah, we'll just put some padding next to, or put some padding in front of the bottom menu so that this isn't so close, because we want it kind of close but not that close. There's like maybe 30 pixel padding right there in the front of the 3 buttons, so make sure that has some padding. We'll do padding for top and bottom, maybe 10 pixels, and then for the left and the right, 30 pixels. That's about right, I guess, maybe 25 pixels. Yeah, that's got 25 pixel padding in front of it. And then maybe a little bit more top and bottom, say 15. Yeah, 15. And the width is good, but now these kind of need to be spread apart. So the actual, these are the H3s, or the different LIs that we have inside the unordered list. So those are these LIs. They're inside the UL, which has display flex on it, but let's put justify content space between on that as well. And oh, but we need to give it a width for that too. Let's say width of, let's try 600 pixels. 600 maybe, actually it's just right. Okay, so 600, and yeah, it's kind of looking the same size and everything as this one. So yeah, if anything, we could make this a little bit bigger, but let's just leave it as it is. And then, okay, so yeah, that's good. Now we need to just make it so whenever I make this smaller, should we do that yet, or should we worry about um these drop downs first? We gotta do something. Both of these are gonna be annoying. Creating the drop downs when we hover over these. I guess that won't be too annoying. We could. I'll use a hover effect for it for now, but just know that the hover effect is no good if you're trying to. If you're gonna have a sub menu, it's not gonna be a good idea. Like this is fine because it's not really, this isn't a sub menu, but whenever we get to this size, now Now we have submenu. Now we have this menu plus these submenus plus these submenus. So yeah, it's gonna be hard to deal with. If you're using hover, it'll be impossible. Like this, however, this way it's fine. So we'll do a hover effect first because I think that'll be easy. So just put a hover effect on the LIs. So whenever I hover over any of the LIs, I want the unordered list to open up, because right now, remember, I put 0 width and height on the unordered list with the overflow hidden, so you can't see them. But I'll say when I hover over the LI, then bring it out. So let's try that. So this LI, when I hover over it, and what's nice about using SAS is I don't have to create a separate LI hover. Like if this was regular CSS, you'd see, well, I'll show you in a second actually. When it compiles to normal CSS, you'll see how much messier it looks. But with SAS, if you want to add a pseudo element, or I don't know if it's called a pseudo element, but like a different state on the LI, like the hover state, then inside the LI, add a and or ampersand and then a colon, and then just add the hover like that. So this will be when we hover over the LI, what kind of rules do we want to have? So when I hover over the LI, I want the UL to have a height of, we're gonna have to, if we want to animate this, we can't put auto if you're gonna like try to animate it growing or something. Let me see how they have it here. Yeah, it like grows. So if you want that effect, auto won't work. We'd have to put like a fixed height on them. I guess we could make them all the same height or something. Here they're not the same height, but they're using JavaScript, so they're able to do some extra stuff. If we're just using CSS, we want that to come out. We'll have to change the height not to auto, but like a fixed number. Actually, we could put a max. We could do that. We could, if we put a max height, I think then should be no problem. So for the unordered list where I had height 0, I'm changing to max height 0. And here we'll say max height, like something just big enough that's gonna be big enough to fit any of them, like 600 pixels. Let's see. So li and colon hover. We want the ul max height to change to 600 pixels instead of 0. I don't see, it's not working yet. So what are we missing? Let me switch it back to height. See if that has any difference. No, no difference. So might be something else I'm doing wrong. Like um, this is working. Compile. Let me check if it compiled in the CSS. So you can see this is what it would look like in regular CSS. We're at what? Where's our hover? Okay, so here's what it looks like with regular CSS. Header, div, bottom menu, nav, ULLI colon hover, UL, max height 600 pixels. Am I supposed to put it on the LI? No, it's on the UL, so I don't know, 600 header, div, bottom menu, nav, ULLI, UL, max height 0, width 0. Yeah, it should be working. Don't know what the problem is. So it should go from max height of 0 to max height of 600 pixels. And then we should be able to see them. Oh, because the width. Oops. Okay. We're not just changing the width. Not just changing the height. Also, the width has to obviously go back to normal. There we go. Okay, so that does work. I just forgot to change the width because that was also 0. Width will change to auto because we're not going to animate the width. We're only going to animate the height. Um, it's not coming out as clean as I was hoping. What are we seeing here? When I hover, we're seeing browse latest. What does that say? Let me try instead of width auto, try like width of something big. Okay, then let's see, it's not in a column for some reason. It's all like listed horizontally. Wonder if let me let me delete the max height and stuff. Put it back how we had it at first. Oh, and so something changed along the way. It's not 2 columns anymore. Display flex. Oh, li call to h3. Li class call to. This one should be 2 columns. We hover over it. This is the one with games in it. It's clearly just a single row. Looks like it's display flex almost. Let me make this bigger. Let's inspect it real quick. So whenever we look at the UL inside, yeah, it's got. Why does it have flex on it? We put display flex, that's why. But we put that on this one, not the other ones. The other ones should just be regular. Okay, so I need to be more specific over here when I said display flex on the nav UL, because I only wanted these to be display flex. Games, more experiences, about, commitment, not the unordered list inside there. So, but this is, they're inheriting it. So these, even though I didn't put display flex on these unordered lists, they're inheriting it. So to be more specific, so this doesn't affect the other unordered list, just put an arrow in front of it, pointing like that. And now, yeah, it's back to a column. So this arrow just means, here's what it looks like in regular CSS, just an arrow. This means the direct child, that's an unordered list. So this means if there's another list item inside this nav, and that list item has its own UL, we don't want this UL to be affected. We only want this UL to be affected. Okay, so but if it's just a space, then this one inherits everything this one gets. But if you put this, then it's like you're saying, I only want this one to be affected. So now it looks better now, but that's I think the only reason why it's all the way there, it looks like it's very far apart, is because I put this 600 pixels here. Let's make that, instead of 600 pixels, change it to auto. Okay, so when we hover over it, we'll see browse games, platforms, PC, so all that stuff will come up. We want to come down a little bit nicer though, like further down, like I guess, like below there. So put some padding below the H3, I guess. I don't have a rule for the H3 yet, I don't think so. That's the H3 inside nav ul li, so H3 padding bottom, let's say like 40 pixels, good amount. Oh, no, if we do that, then I forgot that's gonna make this grow taller. So let's do, instead of padding bottom on the H3, we'll put, when we hover over the UL, we will change the max height to 600, the width to that. Also put some padding top on it. Padding top, 40 pixels. Yeah, goes down a little bit further. This should be auto. What else? I don't want the other buttons to get pushed aside though. So whenever I do this, this grows, but then this more experiences gets pushed on mine, gets pushed to the side. Like those weird things. We can solve that if we make the unordered list position absolute, I believe. Yes, we should do that. So remember how I made this one absolute and it was ignoring this and they were kind of collapsing onto each other? We want that effect on this. So whenever I make this bigger, I don't want the width of this to push the next list item to the side, because um, like this, it's just counting the width of the word games and then more experiences, and it's just putting even amount of space next to them. But since games um, it has this whole unordered list that has its own width, when this gets bigger, the whole li gets bigger. So the whole li is no longer just the size of games, it's as big as these are wide. So the next list item kind of gets pushed to the side. But if we make these two unordered lists, make them position absolute, we might have to put them in another container though, but so if we make these position absolute, then they won't affect the other things. I'm guessing that's what we need to do. So nav ulli hover ul, make it position absolute. And yeah, now you can see it doesn't affect these anymore, but they're like collapsing onto each other though, because they're both absolute. So we'll have to maybe put them in a container and then make that whole container position absolute, not the ULs themselves, so that they don't like overlap each other. So the two ULs, let's put them in a box. So I'll make a div, put these inside. Since I did that, it's gonna kind of change the way we had things before. No longer do we need the two column styles, because now it's a single column. It's just the h3 and the div. It's not the h3 and the ul and the ul. So where we have list li dot call to, we could pretty much get rid of the whole thing. Yeah. And what else? Well, maybe not get rid of it, but put it on that div. Li call to div. Yeah. Wait. Yeah, and then make sure that div is position absolute on that div. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Browse games, platforms. We need to put a bit of a column gap there because they're too close together. Browse games and platforms just right next to each other. So grid, or not grid, but column gap. Let's try 30 pixels. Much better. Okay, so we made this one position absolute, so it has no problem. It doesn't push the other buttons away, but this one is not the position absolute. So we need to make the other UL's position absolute. So this is just that div inside call to. So I have this call to with the two columns. I made that div inside of it position absolute, but that's just the first li. The other ones are just li's with an h3 and a ul. So for those, we need the ul to be position absolute. So let's go back here. I'm thinking we just put it here. But we don't want it to affect the other ones, the ul that's inside this div. So we could either assign position on the ul inside this div by saying ul position relative, so it's not also like the other ones. And that works fine. I'll just leave it like that then. We could do that, or we could have also maybe put an arrow on it, but no, I think there's some stuff here that we want applied to both. So this is the best solution, I think. Just make that position absolute, but you don't want these unordered lists to be position absolute because they collapse onto each other. So to take away position absolute from these two, you have to reassign the position property on the ul that's inside that li dot call to div. So that basically these are all position absolute uls, but these are, we don't want to be position absolute. We want the div that's the container for them to be position absolute. So it's like, yeah, it's like this is the container for all that after the h3, but now the UL is the container for all that after the H3, so kind of have to treat them a little bit differently. So I don't know if that makes sense, but very hard to explain with you're trying to create a drop-down menu and all that. So I'm trying my best here. Um, Let me know if you have questions though, so it makes more sense to you. But that looks nice now. It's more like this. We want to add the animation. We should be able to do that pretty easily because we have it set up correctly. I'm going to put a background color on the body real quick just so, because these have a white background on them. So I want to be able to see that white background. Thank you, Alan. Okay, so let's add a background on this. Let's go after the header. I'll create a main tag. This will be like our main content after the header. For now, I'm just gonna maybe give it a height and put a background color on it. That's it for the moment, but it's gonna be after the header, which is basically after all of this stuff. Main, let's give it a height of, I don't know, like, let's give it a minimum height of 80 VH and a background color of, the other one looks kind of purpley, so we'll put a purple background color on it. And now we can see that my this div and these unordered lists don't really have any background color on them, so let's put a white background color on them. So it's gonna be the ULs. Actually, it'll just be the LIs, I guess. Right? Nav ULLI. Background color, FFF. Yeah, that would make most sense, I think. But let's make sure we add decent amount of padding on those. Oh wait, no, don't do that. Leave the background color on the LIs actually. Yeah, it has to go on the LI, and then if we want to put padding on it, add the padding when you hover. So end hover, padding 30 pixels. Okay, no, that's definitely not a good idea. Why is it doing that? It makes perfect sense. So we don't want to put that on there because the games itself, that H3 is also inside the LI, you have to remember. So the LI is not just this. The LI is the games, a whole bunch of stuff that we don't want to expand like that. So it's the UL LI. We're already seeing the games. It's this div that's gonna need to have the white background. It's gonna be these ULs that's gonna have to have the white background with the padding. So let's not put it on the LI. I think it doesn't hurt to keep the background color of white on the LI, but the padding and stuff should be on the ULs. I don't know why they're not inheriting the background color though. They already have padding top and stuff, so how come we don't see the... Let me try background color on there instead. Okay, that's weird. I thought if I put the LI white background, then like the ULs would also have it, but I think it's because I made them position absolute. It doesn't work exactly the same way, so pretty much let's just put the background color on the ULs. Um, Actually, not just the ULs, but also this div that we created for the first one, because I don't want a gap between them. So put a white background on that one too. There. And also a bunch of padding. So we'll put the padding. I put padding top so far, but let's also put padding all around. So why don't we do padding 40 pixels, and then like, how about just 40 pixels all around? Yeah, that works. 40 pixels all around. These still have bullets on them. Because I put list style type none. Remember I did this arrow, so now the inner unordered list don't inherit this anymore. So I need to assign it to them, so they don't have bullets on them. This looks good. Now need to do the animation thing where it scales out like that. So for that, because we're using max height, so it's going from height 0 to max height of 600 pixels, we can animate going from 0 to 600. So in order to do that, just add a transition. Just add a transition on the unordered lists. So transition, let's just put all, so transitioning whatever properties are changing that can animate. And then how many seconds? 1 second. All 1 second. Maybe not all. So it's also animating the width, but I don't want to animate the width because it looks weird. So let's do just the height. I didn't think the width would even animate because we're going to auto, but I guess auto for width does animate. And it's the max height, not the height. So make sure you put max height for the transition. And oh, let's not just do max height. We also want to maybe animate the padding. That looks really weird the way it's behaving. Like when I hover away, you can see it still has the padding on it, so the padding slides up. So if you don't want that to happen, oops, you could put the transition instead of on the UL, put it on the hover UL, so it doesn't animate going back. It'll only animate coming down, but not going back if you do it on the hover state instead of the regular state. But it does a weird jittery thing. I don't know what's that about. I think it's the the fact that the padding is not animating. That's why it's like kind of popping out. Kind of looks like I have low frame rate or something. So we want to include the padding in the transition. So max height 1 second. I think we put a comma. I forget if we want to add the padding as well. 1 second. Yeah. It would be cool if I could do padding left and right. I don't know if I could do padding left and right, but not top and bottom. It looks like it's the width is still animating, but that's just the left and the right padding. Makes it look like it's growing horizontally. I wonder if I could do padding like left only. Yeah, that works. So instead of padding left, I want to just do padding um, top and bottom. So padding top. Now let's do padding bottom. Padding bottom. 1 second. There we go. So now it's working much more smoothly because it's not transitioning the width, and it's not transitioning the left and right padding, just the top and bottom padding and the height, which is what we need for it to look like it's growing out like that. And then we'll mess with the buttons and stuff. Um, what else? What is this white background on? It's on the whole bottom menu, but I gave it a width of 900 pixels. What about the rest of that? I want the whole thing to be white, so... But if I put a width of 100%, then the buttons will get spread across. I don't want that, so... Let me see. Why don't I just put a white background on the header instead of black? And then on the top menu, put a background color of black. Okay, that works. So that looks more like this. I think that's far enough for today. I mean, did a lot, but we at least now we got it looking like it, and we got the first menu hover effect going. There's still a lot more to do though. There's we need to be able to click on these. That's just a matter of turning them into links, I guess. We need to. I mean, there's still little styling things we need to do, like, but those are not really important. Like making the browse games and platforms, making those bold compared to the others. That's no big deal. The hard part is gonna be um, this shouldn't be too hard, giving this side panel pop out, and then this might be a challenge, like having this come out the side instead of down the bottom, because we're gonna have to change everything. These, it's no longer gonna be a 2-column thing, browse games and platforms. Like here it's a 2-column thing, and it just slides down like this. But here it completely changes. It's a sub menu. You open it and then there's browse games, and you have to click on that to see these. you click on this to see that. We might have to even create a completely separate mobile menu because it's just too different from this one. But we'll get there when we get there. Okay, any questions before we go on break? No questions? I'll upload this for you though. Question? Yeah, I'll try to. It was kind of a lot, but I didn't. There was a bunch of things I had to figure out along the way, so it kind of took longer than it should have. But I tried to explain everything as I did it, so you know why I'm doing everything I'm doing. But I'll try to do a review. Okay, so let me save this and upload it. I'm gonna call it lesson 3 though, so you don't confuse it with the other one. And you guys can take a 15-minute break. Okay, so we'll try to look at these things from a more basic point of view without trying to recreate an existing site or something. That kind of complicates things. But for now, let's cover again some other topics like the basics of the box model, padding, margin, and all that. We're going to need to get into that. Yesterday, I showed you how to bring in stuff with HTML, and we looked at some CSS. So let's open this with, not this one. Let's open this with VS Code. And let's put this on the right side. Oops, why can't I grab it? Put that there, put this here. Alright, so let's go over what we did so far. We brought in our basic HTML structure with just by typing an exclamation and then pressing tab. That gives us most of the, the boilerplate that we need. So it gives us the head and the meta tags and the title. We added the link to our style sheet because remember there's 3 ways to add CSS, and the best way to do it is just in a separate file like this. That way you keep your HTML a little cleaner looking, and also in case you have multiple pages on your website, you could like use the same styling on all of them, because maybe you're using the same font and background color on all your pages, so you could just link to the same style sheet for all your pages instead of having to repeat everything. Right, so again, this is an external style sheet. An internal style sheet would be created with the style element in the head. Same place you would put the link, you would just put style, and then instead of having all of this stuff in a separate file, you could put it right here inside the style element. And also, whenever you have things like this, like an external style sheet, you also have an internal one, and then maybe you have some inline styles with the style attribute. And they might be contradicting styles, right? You might have background color blue violet here, but here you might have background color some other color. So what's gonna happen is the one that's furthest away, which would be the external style sheet, is gonna be overridden by what's closer. So the internal style sheet will override anything from here. Actually, depends on the order. If I put this after this, then no, this will override this because everything is red from top to bottom. So the last thing that is red is gonna be the last thing that happens. So if you put like background color red here, but you put green inside the external style sheet, then it's going to be green because green is the last thing that you said. But if you have any inline styles with the style attribute, that's just going to override everything else. Okay, this is going to be the final word on what style we're going to have. So it's better to just stick to one area that you have your styles. In this case, we'll keep it all external, so you don't get confused and have a hard time figuring out how to change something because you have it as an inline style, internal style, and external style. You're gonna get confused. So keep it all in one place. In this case, we'll do all external styles. Okay, also a reminder, if you haven't finished previous assignments from the past sessions, please finish those soon as you can. I think I was grading 154 and most of you are done. There's a couple assignments missing from some people. I think you still have passing grades, but if you want a higher grade, finish all the assignments. Okay, so alright, so let's stick with the external style sheet. So we know how to change font colors, we know how to change background colors and add borders. And you saw that there's more specific ways to add borders, like do a border top or border bottom, or you can even be more specific than that. You could say border width. Do border top width, border bottom width. I forget if it's the width first or the top first. The side first. It's the side and then border top left radius. Oh, if we're talking about the radius, that's how you round corners. So you could do top left radius, top right radius. If you're only trying to change the radius of one of the corners. But anyways, most of the time you're just gonna do border the same all around. Okay, so when we have a border, let me make that border much thicker. Let's say 20 pixels instead of 2 pixels. And refresh this. Actually, let's open it with live server so we don't have to refresh. Close that other project. So you'll notice when we create the page, there's gonna be some spaces on the outside corners. So by default, there is some padding on the document body, and also might depend on the browser. Some browsers might have different default styles, but most of them will have some padding on the edges to keep the content kind of away from the edge of the page. But you can get rid of all of that, and I usually do like a reset. I make all margin 0, all padding 0, and I change box sizing to border box. But before I do that, let me explain what all of that means. I guess let's open up Illustrator. It was open. Okay. So when you have an element, like I explained that most elements are block level elements. So if you have like an H1, your H1 is gonna be something like this, right? If you put a background color on it, you would see that, well, you won't see anything if there's no text in it, but let's say you write something inside that H1, hello world. By default, it's going to be aligned to the left. It's not going to have a background color on it. It's not going to have a border on it. You're just going to see that. But if you put, if this could be a paragraph, this could be a H1, an H2, an H3, a div. Most elements that are block level, they'll look the same. So you'll have the content inside the element. So in this case, let's pretend this is an H1. It's going to say hello world, probably going to be bold because it's heading. So by default, it's going to make the text bold. If you put a background color on it, you'll see, so you put a yellow background color on it, you would see it like that. If you added padding on the H1, let's say you add like 20 pixel padding, that would expand the sides of it. So it would add 20 pixels on the top, right, bottom, and left. Right, so if you added some padding, it would make the whole element grow bigger. And if you put a background color on it, the background color would also, you'd see it expand. If we're talking about padding, so you have your content of a basic HTML element is going to have this content in it. It's going to have, if you add a border on it, that would be the border. The space inside, let's not put a box on it, but this space inside is the padding. This would be padding top, left, right, bottom. This would be the border. You have border top, bottom, left, and right. And you also have margin. So the margin would be what's outside. You have margin on all sides as well. So if you have like couple elements, you have an H1 and another H1. What's going to determine how far apart they are from each other is going to be that margin. And sometimes the margin collapses on each other. I think most of the time it collapses. We'll have to test it out real quick to see. if the margins add up like this, or do they combine? Okay, because sometimes they combine. So let's try to create two boxes just like this. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a div, an h1, a paragraph. They're all gonna be the same thing. They're gonna have content inside, padding, border, and margin on the outside. So here we have, what do I have here? It's a, where did I put this border? Oh, it's the body. I put that border on the body, border 20 pixel solid. So you can see that there's some space outside of the border. So what does that mean? What is this space called? It's outside the border, so it's the margin, right? Because we're seeing some space out here, it's most likely the margin on the body. But it could also be the HTML element. Maybe the HTML element has padding on it, right? Because the body is inside the HTML element. If the HTML has padding on it, then it's gonna push the content further away from the edges, right? But I'm pretty sure it's margin, so we can try taking away the margin on the body. Let's say margin 0 on it to see if it goes away, and it does. So you can see now there's no more space out there. But yeah, it's just there by default. So that's why in the beginning, when I create a page, I usually do a reset. I say, I use the asterisk, and in CSS, when you put this, it's the same as basically targeting every single element. Like it's like saying paragraph h1, h2, h3, h4, divs, pretty much every element you can think of. It's targeting everything. So you use an asterisk just to say I want to target every single element. And then you put margin 0 and padding 0 just to make sure that there is no default margin or padding. Everything is 0 now. So usually start with that. There's also something called box sizing, and I set this to border box. The default of the box sizing property, I think, is content box. So that's already what it is. But if you change it to border box, it's gonna affect how width and height and padding affect your element. So let's say you have an element here that's let's pretend it's 50 pixels by 50 pixels, right? It's gonna be 50 pixels by 50 pixels if you change the width to 50 pixels and the height to 50 pixels. Right, that makes sense. Obviously, if you put width and height of 50 pixels, then it's gonna have a width and height of 50 pixels. But what if you add padding to it? Because remember, padding is like extra space inside. So maybe you added, maybe you, I don't know, there's some content in here. I'll just make another box for the content. Let's say that's the content of this element. We'll make it orange. Okay, and this is a 50 pixel by 50 pixel box. Let me make this a different color as well. Okay, But imagine you start adding padding to this. Let's say padding of 50 pixels as well. Now, if we add 50 pixel padding, normally what's going to happen is you're going to have 50 pixels padding all around. Um, so this is going to grow by 50 pixels. This is going to grow by 50 pixels. And this is going to grow by 50 pixels. So you're going to end up with something that's not 50 by 50 anymore, but instead, since you're adding 50 and 50 on each side, now it's 150 pixels by 150 pixels, even though you put width and height of 50 pixels. If you add padding 50 pixels, it's going to add that 50 pixels all around, so now it's no longer 50 pixel. But if you change the box sizing to border box, then it's no longer going to behave this way. Now it's going to stay at 50 by 50. And it's just going to add that padding inside, and if it has room or not, it's just going to push the content further away from it. It'll be better if we do an example so you kind of see it in action. I'll do a box down here. So just after the paragraph, actually, sorry, that's the whole body. Let me get rid of the styling on the body. Actually, I'll keep the font family, but I'll delete everything else. And let's just add a box down there. I'll add a box using, let's just use an H1. Say this is our content of the box. I already have an H1 here, so let me make this a H2 so we don't confuse the two. I have an H2 as well, so let me make that a H3 then. H3. So it'll be an H3. And let's say for the H3, let's put a background color on it first of all so we can see the actual thing. Wait, that's too light. Just pick some color like this. So there's our H3. Now let's change the width of the H3 and the height of it as well. So let's say it's got a width of 50 pixels and a height of 50 pixels. Okay, maybe that's a little too small. Let's make it 100 by 100. Okay, so now that's our H3. It's a square with a width and a height of 100 pixels. If you measured it, you could measure it if you go inspect on your browser and find the element, like it's right here in our elements. If you right click and inspect, you'll see like elements, network console. Under elements, you'll see all the HTML elements. If you hover over that element, which is this H3, it says right there 100 by 100. You can't probably see it from my screen right now because it's kind of small, but when I hover over this, it shows 100 by 100 on the H3. Just to confirm that it's 100 by 100. But now let's add some padding on it. Let's say padding of 50 pixels. Notice it got bigger, right? So now if we look at the size of that, it's 200 by 200 because I added 50 pixels all around. So since I added 50 pixels on the left. That's 150 pixels. Another 50 pixels on the right. So all of a sudden, the width is now 200 instead of 50. Instead of 100. But if you didn't want that to happen, you could change box sizing to border box. And now it stays 100 by 100. But because we're asking for 50 pixel padding over here on the left side, it's kind of pushing the content out of it. But you know, if we made the whole thing big enough, like let's say 300 by 300, then it wouldn't be a problem. It would push this 50 pixels away from the sides, but it would stay 300 by 300. And just to test it out, let's inspect it. We see here it is indeed 300 by 300. So the padding is not adding to the width and the height. If you take out the box sizing border box, then it does add. Now it's bigger. So now it's going to be 400 by 400. Yeah. So it's a default thing. I like to always have box sizing set to border box. I think that's just easier to work with when it's border box, because then everything's the correct width and height that you expect it to be. So it's not just padding that would affect it. It's also if you added border on it. Let's say border 50 pixel solid. You see, it's now, let's check what size it is actually. It's 400 by 400 because, again, it's adding the border to the right side and the left side and the top and the bottom. It's adding an extra 50 pixel width to it. So now it's basically the width became 400 and the height became 400 because we added 50 pixels. But if you add box sizing border box, then you can see it shrinks down. Now it's 300 by 300 as it's supposed to be. And it's not adding the border to the overall width and height. Okay. So that's something that I always have in the beginning. Border, box sizing, border box. So I don't have to add it here. I'll delete this as well. And delete this one as well. So any questions on that? So you have, again, box sizing, border box. Just make sure if you add any border or padding to something, it's not gonna add that to the overall width and height. Margin is a different story. Let's add. Let's put two boxes now. Let's put an H3 and another H3. Say box 1, box 2. So we have box 1 and box 2 down here. Let's put background color on them. They're both H3, so background color. Let's make that darker. Okay, so there's box 1 and box 2. Right now they're touching, so it looks like one big box, but they're just right up against each other. So like I said, the margin is the space outside. So if you have 0 margin, then you're gonna have boxes that are right on top of each other, and if they have no border on them, then it's just gonna look like one box, which is the case with this one right here. So if we want to push them apart, we could add some margin on them. So let's add margin 20 pixels, and now you can see they have some space between them. I put margin 20 pixels, so it puts 20 pixels all around. So it also added it on the left and the right, as well as the top and bottom. So that's why it got pushed to the right a little bit. But you can see that that's the margin, and it looks like, I was wondering, do they combine or do they add up? Looks like they combine. I'm guessing. It looks like that's what's happening here. You could tell because the space between them is the same as the space over there. So it's about 20 pixels, 20 pixels. So it's not like it's not becoming 40 pixels because they both have 20 pixels on the top and bottom. So margins do combine. I don't know if that's 100% of the time that's the case. There might be situations where they actually do add up, but I don't think so. I think it's always going to be like that. So margin is also something you can use to center an object. Right now, these are centered. They look centered because the width is, by default, all block level elements, they have a width of 100% minus whatever margin you put there. That's going to make it look smaller. If this was zero margin, then you would see that it's actually 100%. But if you change the width, let's say to 200 pixels, you'll see that it's no longer centered. Right now it's left aligned because I made it smaller. So you could text align center if you want to center the text inside. And sometimes you'll be tricked. You'll think this text, like if I hadn't put width of 200 pixels on this, you would think the the H3 is centered, but it's really not. It's the text inside the H3 that's centered. If you want to center the H3 itself, make the width a little bit smaller so you could, actually try to center it. You can see here it's actually not centered. It's the text inside that's centered. But if you wanted to center the element itself, bring that to the middle, you can use a margin of auto on it. Just add margin auto. And it's really margin left and right are supposed to be auto, but putting auto just puts it all auto. If you don't want any margin on the top and the bottom, you could put margin 0 auto. Kind of the same thing here though. Or you could specify what you want on the top and the bottom. Let's say we want like 20 pixels. Now it's 20 pixels top and the bottom, and auto on the left and the right. So that's a basic way to center an element that's block level. Remember, I talked about display block, right? So most elements are display block by default. So anything that's display block, this applies to that. You use margin auto to center it. Okay. If it's something that's inline or inline block, then the way you would center it. By the way, when you make something inline, you'll notice the width no longer has any effect on it. If you add padding, I think you will see the padding, but it will ignore other elements. You can see like it's bleeding into the paragraph. So you could still add the padding on an inline element, but it will like float over other elements. Like the other elements will ignore the padding on these H3s. If you make it inline block, they won't ignore it anymore. So inline block is like a mix between block and inline. So you don't use margin auto to center inline block. In order to center something that's inline block, you have to text align the parent to center. So if the H3 is inside, well, right now it's just the body. So if I wanted to center these, I would have to put text align center on the body. And this is the same for inline as well as, center, not body. The same with inline and inline block. You want to text align to the center, or you want to center it, you put text align center on the parent. Okay. Anyways, it'll come up again. We'll have to use these. But for now, let's delete these. So I hope that explains the concept of margin, padding, and borders. Let's get rid of that text align center. So what do we do here? Okay, let's just make this look a little bit nicer by adding some of that padding. So my name here is too close to the picture, or the picture is too close to my name. You could look at it both ways. You could put padding on the picture, or you could put padding on the H1. I'm gonna put padding on the H1. I guess I don't have any styles for the H1. What's this H3 styling for? Oh, it's for the two boxes I just made. So for the H1, which is this one, we'll put padding of 20 pixels. Probably also want to maybe center that. So remember, right now it has like a width of 100%. If I want to center my name, I could just put text align center on the H1. It won't center the H1 itself. It doesn't need to because it has a width of 100%. But when I add text align center, it's aligning the text inside of it to the center, but not the element itself, because it doesn't need to with the width of 100%. Okay, so that's centered. We want to center the image as well. Now images, you might not expect it, but images by default are display inline. These are not block level. If I added multiple images, let's make it, actually 200 is fine. Let me zoom back out to 100%. So images by default are inline. So if I had 2 of these or 3 of them, or 4 of them, you'll see that they can go next to each other. They're not like the H1s and the divs and the paragraphs that have to go on a separate line. So by default, they are display inline. Might be inline block. It's either inline or inline block. I mean, they kind of behaves the same no matter what, so I don't think it matters if it's inline or inline block. We're gonna do the same thing if we want to center them. We'd have to center the parent, which is again the body. If you put text align center on the body, you'll see that the image will center. So if we go to the body, add text align center, see that picture goes to the middle. But when we do that, we also center the paragraphs, and it's not a good idea to, like when you have long paragraphs, you should not center them. Only center titles and stuff like that, or short, like headings and stuff. If you have a paragraph, you want that to remain text align left. Now, another thing you could do is instead of putting text align center on the body and then having to text align left the paragraph again, you could also just make the image display block, and then put margin auto on it. And you could center it that way as well. Make it a block level element and then block level element center with margin auto, so you could do that. This is an H2, I believe. Want that centered as well. H2. Actually, I want the H2 to be both 20 pixel padding. I also want it to be centered, just like the H1. So instead of putting a separate H2 here and then putting the same thing, you could just put a comma here. Let's say H1 and H2, want them to be 20 pixel padding, text line center. And the paragraph, let's give that one some padding as well. It's too close to the edges. Padding 20 pixels. And maybe because when we're zoomed out, we don't have that much text, so the paragraphs doesn't make sense to have two columns. Doesn't look good like that. So well, let's add a little bit more text, I think. Let's add like another lorem, like 40 or something. After that, just make it a little bit more text. But either way, it's still gonna look awkward like this. It's like full screen. It's two columns for no reason. And it spreads out really far. So what you might want to do is put a width on the paragraph. So let's say for the paragraph, let's put a width of, I don't know, the picture is 200 pixels. We'll make the paragraph maybe the same size, 200 pixel. Actually, no. Did I put box sizing border box? I did. So the problem here is with 200 pixel width and the 20 pixel padding and the two columns, it's kind of way too narrow. Put a background color on it so you could actually see that it really is the same width as, well, it should be the same width. Wait, how wide is this? Oh, I put height 200 pixels, not width. So the width of this is actually probably much bigger. Okay, let's change the width of it so we can make the paragraph the same width. That's 200 pixels, which is too small. So let's make it 400. And let's make the paragraph also 400. That looks better, I guess. Now to center the paragraph, who can tell me how I'm gonna center the paragraph? Oh, I just saw your comment, Emil. How can we add text, for example, at the bottom? One word, but bigger spaces to occupy the two column graph. I don't get what you mean. At the bottom, one word? Which one word? Oh, you want to spread the letters apart? Good question. So any text editing you can imagine is probably going to be available here. So things like line height, for example, if this paragraph, you want to change the line height, you can do that. Let's say 20 pixels. Well, that's kind of close to what it was already. 50 pixel line height spreads the lines apart. You're talking about letter spacing. So you want to spread this apart. You can add letter spacing. Let's say 10 pixels. Oh wait, I put it on the paragraph. I meant to put that on the H2. So you could do that. There's also, let's cover the units that you can use. So when we're talking about text, font size and everything, you can use pixels. So I could say 10 pixels, for example. But usually better idea might be to use EM or REM. So 1 EM is basically saying make the letter spacing 1 EM or 100% the width of a normal letter. So if my letters have a certain width, the space between them is also going to be that same width. If I say make it 0.5 EM, it's going to be half of the letter width. 0.1 will be 0.1 the width of the letter. That way it will affect like different font sizes correctly, I guess. So like if I put this letter spacing on the body, like if I put 20 pixels, which is a lot, let's put like 10 pixels. You'll see the paragraph letters look more spaced apart than, let's say, the H1. So the H1 has bigger text. Let's make the H1s even bigger and the H2 is even bigger, so this is more obvious. I'll change the font size. So for the font size as well, you can use pixels or you can use EM. So if I say 2 EM, it should make the, well, see 1 EM, that's the font size of like the regular font size at 1 EM. It makes it the same size as the paragraph basically at 1 EM. If we make it 2 EM, it'll be twice the size of the paragraph. If we say 3, it'll be 3 times the size. Let's make it like 5 so it's more obvious here what I'm trying to demonstrate. So I put letter spacing 10 pixels, but this looks completely normal. This looks completely normal. But you look at the paragraph and the letters are obviously very far apart, right? But if you want some more consistent spacing, then use EMs. So let's say 0.5 EM. So that's spaced apart, and these are spaced apart equally, it looks like. Alright, so these are just bold, that's why they kind of look a little bit closer together, but let's say font weight normal. So they're not so bold. You'll kind of see they do, using EMs on the letter spacing, they look more consistent. Let me write welcome for the first word. Let me see if it actually is. Welcome. Yeah, no, they still do look kind of more far apart than the other ones. But that's because where you also basing the EM, I think it's the EM is still based on the regular small size. I think that's why these are closer together. These are still far apart. But it's not as bad as if you used pixels. So one way to, like, you could set like a standard like base font size in the beginning. Like you could say body font size. Maybe your basic font size was 12 pixels or something. Wait, don't forget the semicolon. At 100%. Let me get rid of the letter spacing real quick so see how normal it looks. So if I put font size 12, let's put like 14. Let's make that the base size. Maybe even 16. So that's like a good idea to, if you're trying to use EMs or REMs, you can set like a base font size 16 pixels, and then if I say for font size 5 EM, it's going to be 5 times that 16 pixels basically. And REM kind of does the same thing. I forget what the exact difference is, but actually it might have to do with, let's test it out. Let's say font size for the paragraph, make it 1 REM, and for the H2 make it 1 REM, and the H1. Okay, so if I do this, you can see, yeah, they're gonna be based on that 16 pixels. So if I put 16 pixels as the base font size, and then in the H1 and H2 and the paragraph, I put font size of 1 rem, then it's gonna be just 100% of that 16 pixels. But if I put EM instead of REM, it kind of does the same thing. Again, I don't know the exact difference between REM and EM. We could Google it to figure it out, but if since they behave the same, so we could just use them the same way for now. If they do something unexpected, then we'll mess around with changing it to EM or REM, see if it makes any difference. Let's see, what if we put H1 and H2 3 rem, but I want the H2 to be a little bit smaller, and let's keep the font weight bold. So in that case, I would want to do these maybe separately. I'd keep the padding the same, the text align the same, but for font size, I'm going to make the H1, let's make it 2 rem or 3. And for the H2 font size, 2 rem. Okay. Anyway, so I'm just using rems as in like 3 times the size of that or 2 times the size of that. You could also use percentages. 100%, 200%, 300%. Kind of does the same thing as the rems, doesn't it? Except I don't think it's, yeah, it is. It's exactly the same. So 300% or 3 rem or 3 EM. The differences will come up eventually. When they do, then we'll worry about them. But there are for sure differences. But for the most part, like this, they kind of behave exactly the same. Alright, so let's center this paragraph. So to center the paragraph, well, I was just asking you guys, so how should I center it? Anyone know what to add to my paragraph rule to center it? Anyone? Starts with the M. Oh, it's right there. Margin. Auto. That should center the paragraph. I kind of want the paragraph to be the same exact width as the picture, but because there's 20 pixel padding, it's kind of smaller, so we could just get rid of that 20 pixels. I only needed it when it was like touching the edge. Now that it's centered, I don't really need that. Let's also, do we need the column rule? Let's keep the column rule, that's the line down the middle. Let's change the column gap to be a little bit bigger. Column gap, let's say 20 pixels. How about 40? 40 is good. Let me get rid of that column rule though. I don't think I need that. Okay, so there's our nicely formatted for simple content, just a picture and some headings and some text. You want to center it, make sure you put margin auto and put proper width and height and margins and paddings. And you could pretty much have any, you could have a professional looking website just by having proper margins, paddings, and centering things. But, if you were gonna worry about, like responsiveness, like having different layouts for different screen sizes, we'll get into that later. You want to justify the text. Text align justify. But I think that's only used in like newspapers and stuff. Yeah. Okay, any questions so far? So from today's lesson, I just hope you take away your you now understand margin, padding, box sizing, and how to center different elements. Inline elements, inline block, and block level. They all have their own ways of centering. And then when we get into display grid and flex, then the same rules don't apply. Then you have to use those methods, like display flex and grid have their own ways of centering things. What could we add here to real quick? Let's add hover effect on something here. Maybe maybe on the picture. Let's add a hover effect. When we hover over the picture, let's have it change the opacity. So for the image, I'm gonna change the opacity to, let's say 0.8, 0.5, let's say. Okay. When we hover over the image, we can say image : hover. So if you wanna, these are called, I forget if it's pseudo element or pseudo something. Well, pseudo element is like if you wanna target the first line of every paragraph, you could use p : first line. That's not what I'm trying to show you though. Pseudo selectors, pseudo classes. Okay, yeah, here we go. So a pseudo class is a keyword added to a selector that specifies a special state of the selected elements. For example, hover can be used to change the button used to change a button's color when the user pointer hovers over it. Well, in this case, we're going to change the opacity. So we have image, and then if we want to do something different when we hover over the image, we could put image : hover. For example, here opacity is 0.5. Here we could change it to 1. So now if I hover over it, the opacity changes. There's some cool additional CSS effects that were added with CSS 3, I believe. We could add filters on images now. Let's see. I forget how to, I don't know if we could do a blur on the image. If we type blur, maybe it'll come up. Box shadows are something that were added. Let's do a box shadow first, and then I'll figure out the blur. To look it up, because those filters, I think there's a special way of adding them. But instead of opacity, let's say it has a box shadow of 2 pixel, 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.5. This means we're gonna add a shadow to this. It's kind of small. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Let's go 5 pixel, 5 pixel, 5 pixel. So what these numbers are, these first three, this is the X offset, the Y offset, and this is how much you want to blur the shadow. And then this is the color of the shadow. And I used RGBA so I could make it transparent. RGBA is red, green, blue, and alpha. That last one is basically the opacity. So you pick for red, green, and blue something between 0 and 255. 0, 0, 0 is black. And for the alpha, you choose something between 0 and 1. So 0.5 to be half transparent, 1 to be normal, 0 to be invisible, basically. So my shadow is a transparent black. And it's been offset on the x-axis 5 pixels, so that means it moved to the right 5 pixels. And it's also been offset on the y-axis 5 pixels, so it moved down 5 pixels. And it has a blur of 5 pixels. If I make that blur like 0, for example, you'll see it's a lot sharper. If I make that like 20 pixels, it's a lot more soft. So I'll keep it maybe at 10 pixels, and that looks fine. So now we have a shadow on that. We could, when we hover over it, we can sharpen the shadow to make it look like, actually we'll do when we click on it. So instead of hover, you can also add active. Active is when you click on something. Let's change it to blur of, from 10 pixels, we'll go down to like 3 pixels. And you can see now when I click on it, that shadow gets sharper. We can also make it get tiny bit smaller. Like it has a width of 400. We'll change the width to 390. So it looks like it's going down. And also let's make the offset go closer, so it looks like it's 390 is too much, isn't it? Let's make it 398. Just gets a tiny bit smaller. So now it's like a 3D effect. We're clicking the picture. Yeah, it looks like it's a 3D image where it's going in and out. Something better than changing the width though. Problem with changing the width is other elements move around whenever I make it smaller. You can see my name moving around. If you don't want those to move around, then instead of changing the width, you can do a transform. And then you can, with transform, if you do scale, you can do scale. You can do scale X, Y, and Z, or just scale, and it'll do all of it together, I think. 0.9. Yeah, 0.9 is too much. Let's do 0.99. There we go. So that way it doesn't affect my name. That stays where it is. So when you do transforms, it doesn't affect the space that the element originally takes up. Okay, so for the other class, I was using the hover effect to, wait, not this one, that's that. Not that one. Oh, there it is. So here I'm using the hover effect to have a drop down come out. So the hover effect can also be used to affect other elements, but only specific element. I can't click on one element and then change any other element I want on the page. To do that, you'd have to use JavaScript. With JavaScript, you can do that. But if you're using just CSS and you want to affect one element by hovering over or clicking or interacting with some other elements, like let's say I click this and I want the paragraph to change, I can't really do that. The only way that would be possible is if they were both siblings of the same parent, but sometimes that's impossible. You can't put two things together. Sometimes they're just completely different elements. They're just different parts of the page. In this case, probably might be able to do it. But also, if I wanted to click the paragraph and do something to this, then maybe I wouldn't be able to do that because this comes before the paragraph. But situations like if you have siblings are elements that are next to each other in the same level. Like the H2 and the paragraph are siblings. Pretty much everything right now is inside the body are siblings because I I don't have any containers for anything. It's just the body and then all this stuff inside. Um, but what I could do is if I click the image, I can also affect this H2. And pretty much I'm using techniques similar to that to get the drop down effect. I'm hovering over a list item. Inside that list item, I have an unordered list. So I'm hovering over the list item and I'm changing the CSS of the unordered list that's inside of it. So something similar we could do is we'd have to create a container to get that same example. Of like hovering over a parent and affecting the child. We could do that if we maybe put some of these things inside a container. Let's put the paragraph and the H2 together in a container. Put a div. I don't know if I talked about divs yet, but div is just a division, just a box basically you could use to group things together. It's block level, so if you want to put multiple divs next to each other, you have to change their display property or use CSS grid or flex. But right now we're not doing that, so I'm just gonna put these inside. Gonna put them inside the div. Okay. So I have a div. Let's put a background color on it so we can see it. Let's pick something we haven't used. A greeny yellow. Okay, so there's my div. So I can technically, if I say div : hover, I could change the background of that div to a different color. That would just demonstrate the same thing I did with the image though. Hovering over it changes the style of that div itself. But I can also say when I hover over the div, I want not the div's background color to change, but let's say the paragraph. So now, when I hover over the div, the paragraph inside the div background changes to this blue color. Or want it to look more like that drop down example, I can change the height, or let's say max height, to like 800 pixels. And originally we could say, for our paragraph, maybe it has a height of 0 and the overflow of hidden. So when something has overflow hidden, that means if something doesn't fit inside it, you can't see it. So since the paragraph has a height of 0 and overflow hidden, you can't see the text inside. Okay, but I'm adding, when I hover over the div, I want the paragraph max height to change to 800 pixels. And actually make sure I put max height, not height, because they're different. So if I hover over the div, the max height of the paragraph should change to 800 pixels, so I should be able to see it. That's pretty much how the drop down works. And then you can add transitions. Transitions basically let you animate different effects. So if I want to animate the max height, I'll say transition max height. And then you have to say how long do you want it to take. Let's say 1 second. You could also add a delay, like if you wanted to wait 3 seconds before it happens. 2, 3. See, after 3 seconds it opens. But let's not put a delay. Let's just put max height 1 second. And then when I hover over it, the paragraph grows. Put like 3 seconds, happen more slowly. Okay, so you can add a hover effect over one element and affect another element. Same way you could, affect another element inside another element. You can also do it on different states. Now, active is when you click something. So while my mouse is clicked, it opens up. When I let go, it goes away. Active is not a good way to do a drop-down menu because as soon as you let go of the mouse, it closes. So for this, if we wanted like a clicking drop-down instead of a hover, we'd have to use a different method, and that would be focus. But I'm not gonna get into it right now. But it's something we'll have to get into for the other class, if I want to create like a sub menu that opens up like this. We'll have to figure that out. Okay, I think we should call it then. I don't need to give you guys this, do I? I'll upload it because, well, let me see what I did. Wait, not this one. Okay, I'll just upload what I have right here. I'm gonna upload it so you guys can look over. And this will be your second assignment. But obviously, don't just do what I did. I just put some random text here, but I want you to actually use some text. Maybe throw in a couple other elements, but make sure you're using CSS and you're styling it nicely. let's call this assignment 2. For the other class, your assignment, you are going to have to create a clone of a website. So follow along my clone of the EA website. You could possibly use that. But I'll probably make you do a different website though. Yeah, 165. Let's upload the second assignment. So the instructions are create a profile, type page or about me, about yourself. Use external CSS, center some content, change widths, and use margins, paddings, and maybe border. See example. I'll put the example right here. Okay, so for the other class, just make sure you're looking at the site clone. I already uploaded the updated version, so your assignment is just to understand that. And maybe start cloning a different one, because that will be like a final assignment. It'll take you a while, so you might want to get started as soon as you want. And let me give you the sign out code. Does anyone have questions? Sign out code is 929. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording.